that's one of these emails that gets viral and goes around about we're going to tax savings and IRAs.
He talked about it. We switched Congress in '94.
There's no talk of doing it. There's nothing in Washington talking about it. But let me tell you something. What's happening in Cyprus is wrong. Whenever government decides it's going to fix its problem by going into your bank account and levying a surcharge against it in order to pay theirs, that's terrible. And one of the reasons the American stock market the last 10 days has been going through the roof, if you look at financial services stocks, they're all going up for one reason. If they raid those bank accounts in the European Union, capital is going to flee Europe and come to the United States because they're not going to sit there and risk having their money in the bank that the European Union may come and assess them. So,
good point.
No, that's what already happened. It's already happened. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just back to Social Security and raising the retirement age for people who are not yet in Social Security.
Right.
This seems innocuous to me, and yet there's still so much opposition to it from Democrats. Do you understand what possible objection they can have? It's not like it would be applied to people who are 65. We're talking about people who are under 55.
It would be people 55 years or younger.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question.
I mean, what logical argument do they have?
If you were a politician who liked to use other people's money to buy votes, it's logical.
But if the American people understood that issue, they couldn't possibly be against raising the age.
Well, they're not, I think, in the vast majority, but there are two culprits in that argument. One are Democrats and the other is the ARP, which I do not belong to. Cancel my membership when George Bush tried to reform Social Security. They went after him for trying to save a program that seniors have paid for. I got fed up to here with him, but it is kind of if I can get enough money out of your pocket for taxes to pay you a Social Security payment, I can keep you indebted to me and I can keep you working longer, and that's the perfect triangle for Democrats. But we ought to reform it, and we ought to make it work.
What do you think the chances are? Because that to me is the safest, most innocuous change we can make.
It's going to happen. In fact, I think this year is going to be a magic year where lightning strikes and we finally deal with discretionary spending, with corporate tax reform, and with entitlement reform. We're in a sweet spot where we have the president not up for re-election. We have off-year elections next year, and there'll be a new president after 2016. It's the perfect time to do some tough stuff, and I think we will. Yes, sir.
Until I retired and got on Medicare, I didn't realize that it's already mean tested in a certain way.
Your premiums mean tested.
Right, but that's never talked about. And that could be expanded, of course, and keep it going up higher. And something you hadn't mentioned earlier, do you have a position on whether Social Security contributions should be on all income, period, or at some much higher level than the 115,000 or whatever it is now?
The answer to the second question, which is Social Security, is that depends on how you recalibrate eligibility. I think you can recalibrate eligibility without raising the ceiling on which you levy the tax, which is now $110,000, but you may have to do that. That's another way to do it. The first statement is on Medicare. I'm on Medicare. I have Medicare Part A. I still work full-time, so I have a group medical policy. But excuse me, Part B, which is your doctor's bills, stuff of that nature, you pay a premium every month. It's deducted from your Social Security check. The minimum payment is $95 a month. The maximum is $395 a month. And what the Social Security Administration and Medicare do is they look at your last year's tax return, and they set your premium for this year based on what your income was last year. And it is means tested, as you said. So if you made a lot of money, you pay $395 a month. If you didn't make any money, you pay $95 a month. And that's been true in Medicare for years and years. And I have no objection to that. You're still getting the benefit, but you may be paying a little bit more if you've got the ability to pay a little bit more. But if you can save Medicare for everybody, that's what's important. Yes, sir.
Could you go back to the health care? You were talking about the religious freedom of conscience, and you said that there was a vote in January that basically knocked that out.
No, I'm not mistaken. When American health care bill passed, it knocked it out.
Right, but you said
And there was a vote to restore that, but we failed. In the budget, and that was Saturday morning.
So what's the game plan to fix that?
I ain't no quitter. We're going to keep fighting. I mean, that's all you can do, but you gotta keep fighting. Well, I gave you that story to let you know we are still fighting. We believe in religious liberty and conscience. Yes, sir.
You support the fair tax or the flat tax, and what's the possibility of any income tax reform this year?
Well, you had a pretty substantial personal income tax reform January 1st because we locked in the rates that I talked about a minute ago. And you've got, those rates are basically like, Reagan lowered the number of marginal rates from 11 to 3. We now have 4 marginal rates. That's not a flat tax, but it's a flatter tax than we had when Reagan was president, when he took over. I happen to support consumption taxes. I think they make a lot more sense because they kind of index your tax to your ability to spend. But converting to that depends on having a president running on that issue or getting elected. The will's not in the Congress to do it. And you have to it's going to be a tough transition from what we've got to where we need to be, but I'm prepared to write a tough transition to get there because a simpler code is better.
Absolutely.
In terms of corporate tax reform, which we have not done yet, we have a finance committee, which I'm on. We're meeting over the next 10 weeks to come up with a corporate tax reform recommendation to the Congress. And I think it's going to be the following, something close to the following. Repeal all the tax gimmicks and loopholes in the corporate tax code. Repeal them all. That generates revenue. Use that revenue to reduce the tax rate from 35% to hopefully 25%. Allow offshore profits that have been earned to be repatriated without a double taxation. If you do that, you will simplify the tax, you will flatten the tax, you'll unconfuse, which is not a word, but it makes sense. The code, and we'll all be a lot better off. I hope that's what happens. Good question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Senator, why is it more attention paid to the unofficial unemployment rate?
Because it's too high. The politicians don't. I mean, I'm just trying to tell you the truth. Is that the politicians don't want. The underemployment rate or the official rate is always, underemployment rate or the actual rate is always higher than the official rate. And it kind of depends on what part of the country you're in, but it's substantially higher than the 7.7% they report as being the actual unemployment rate. But it's politics. I mean, the party and the people in charge don't want the word number to be any worse than they can control. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. On the front page.
Dick told me you were going to ask a lot of questions.
On the front page of this week's Atlanta Business Chronicle, there's an article about AAA Parking Company that handles a lot of parking downtown, and they are saying that the cost to have health insurance as mandated by the Affordable Care Act for their people would cost them over $3 million. So they're going to reduce a lot of people now to below 30 hours a week. Right. And a lot of companies are going to do that. Well, that's going to have a tremendous negative impact on people. And do you think there are enough Democrats in the Senate who would consider repealing certain parts of the Affordable Care Act?
Not yet, but it's coming. Let me tell you the truth about the Affordable Care Act. If you back away and look at it as an objective observer, it is written and designed to cause business to get out of the business of providing health insurance to their employees and driving everybody to a single-payer government system. That's what it's really all about. That's the philosophy President Obama has, and that's what he fought for. These people, they're dropping people down to below 30 hours so they're qualified as full-time employees. They're trying to get out of the business of having to provide it. There are a lot of companies, particularly small businesses, the fine that you pay for not providing insurance is a heck of a lot cheaper than providing the insurance. So people are just going to jettison their policies, drive everybody to the government exchange. It's a socialized medicine concept. It's historically been a lot like the European concept. They're trying to all change theirs now. We seem to be backwards. We're kind of going where people have already gone and said that doesn't work. Yes, sir.
Yeah, every once in a while we hear the reference to off-budget items. And you say, what is that? Well, I think I know a little bit, and it includes any of the expenditures we've incurred for the 2 wars we've been in for many years, 10 years. Is that correct?
That is, it's not a budgeted amount, but it's reflected in the national debt.
But in other words, you didn't necessarily vote for or against expenditures, they just...
We fund the Department of Defense based on the appropriations bill, based on what they need to carry out their mission. But we don't budget for wars, but if we declare a war or we get into a conflict, we don't use a lack of money as a reason to not back our troops in the field. Once an American citizen goes in harm's way on behalf of the United States of America, you don't want some bureaucrat decide whether or not he gets 3 bullets or 2. We want to make sure they got everything they need to carry out their mission and fight their job. That's why it's off budget. But that doesn't mean we hide it and mask it. One of the big reasons our deficit has gone up as much, our debt has gone up as much as it has over the last 10 years. It's been because of the cost of the overseas operations. OCO is what it's called, Overseas Contingency Operations.
If I may, one other question has to do with the veterans.
Right.
General Shinseki is noted for being one of the best generals we've ever had. And he's in charge of the VA now. And there's a scandal every day, it seems like. And 600,000 veterans are waiting to be served. They haven't even got enough people to get them on the roll. Is there any answer? You've been very involved with veterans, I know that.
I'm on the Veterans Committee, and I don't know if 600,000 is the right number, but the average wait time for certification of a claim at the VA now is 438 days, which is about a year and a third. That's ridiculous. The computer system that's going in is going to help a lot with that. With the new manpower we put in is going to help a lot with that. I agree with you what you said about General Shinseki, but what we really need, we don't need a hard-nosed general. We need a hard-nosed business person to run the VA because we don't have the business acumen down there that you really need to manage something that's claims-oriented, service-oriented, benefit-oriented like it is. We're trying. And I think Shinseki is a wonderful human being, great servant to America and the armed services, but we really need more of a business-type person running, which if I were ever president, which I'm not going to be, that'd be the first thing I did because I think that's where it needs to be. Yes, sir.
I'm interested in your comment that this is a magical year, and it sounds like you think there's going to be a grand bargain on the deficit and the debt.
If we're ever going to have one, this is the year, yes.
How do you see that playing out?
Well, you know, here's what I think. It's very instructive that we did the taxes January 1st. It's very instructive we did the budget after going 4 years without doing one last week. It's very instructive we're now doing appropriations bills. We've kicked the can down the road long enough. The American people are also educated enough to realize that we do have a problem, we better do something about it. I think Social Security and Medicare, in answer to your question, is the magic bullet. If we can well up the intestinal fortitude, recalibrate the formulas to save Social Security and recalibrate Medicare to make it work, then all else is easy. If we can take that third rail of politics, which are benefit programs for constituents, and calibrate it for the 21st century, then everything else becomes much easier. So I think this is a year where we might hit that sweet spot. It's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. The president, if he has any sense at all, knows his legacy so far is not a very good legacy if he were to leave office today. But if he left office with a president who turned the paradigm in terms of the way we were going on spending and the way we were going on deficits, got our arm around our fiscal house and did so arm in arm with Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate, we could really make a break. And the American business wants it. The American people want it. I mean, I talk about the things I talked about in this speech today everywhere I go, about reforming entitlements, about means testing, about all these things, what you mentioned. Everybody says, oh, people don't want any of that. Nobody argues with it. What they want is us to get something done. And I think the attitude of the American people is there to be supportive. There will be a lot of fights. There will be a lot of people say, I'm going to run you out of office and all that sort of stuff. Well, I'm 68. I don't have a whole lot longer to go anyway, so I'd rather go out on a high note than not on a low note. Just protecting your job, that's not worth it if you're not doing a good job. So I think the time is there, because if we don't do it this year, it's going to take a new presidency and a new administration 3 years from now to do it. That's a long time to wait.